Welcome to This Week in South Carolina. I'm Gavin Jackson. Almost a year ago, one of the most deadly prison attacks happened in Lee County when 7 people were killed during a riot. For decades, South Carolina's Department of Corrections has been drastically underfunded, leading to issues that make it hard to recruit and retain employees, in turn making it easier for criminal activity to take place. But the department has continued to make strides to fix ongoing problems.
The South Carolina Department of Corrections continues to make strides despite a difficult past 12 months, during which time it saw one of the worst prison riots in the country that left 7 dead and 17 injured at Lee Correctional Institute in Bishopville. And a recent report found that 10 inmates have been prematurely released over the past 2 years. After years of agency underfunding, the state legislature has increased corrections officers' starting salary by roughly 28% and continues to send money for safety upgrades for facilities. With a strong economy and difficult working conditions in which 46 employees were seriously assaulted in 2018, it makes it difficult to recruit needed officers, the agency said. In the current House-approved budget for the upcoming fiscal year is $10 million for safety upgrades at facilities and $10 million to treat and prevent hepatitis C among the prison population, this following a legal challenge. The agency continues to combat the issue of inmates obtaining illegal cell phones, thanks to fencing around the prisons, managed access technology, and forthcoming legislation. About 500 fewer people are incarcerated since this time last year, and the prison population has been steadily declining since sentencing reform was enacted in 2010. A good sign since the annual cost of an inmate is $21,756. But South Carolina now has the 4th lowest recidivism rate in the country and continues to improve its work and education offerings behind the fence, as well as its reentry programs.
We'll examine these issues the prison system is facing with South Carolina's Department of Corrections Director Bryan Stirling. Thanks for joining us today, Bryan.
Happy to be here.
So I just want to kind of talk about most recent news facing the prison systems right now. We might have seen some reports about 10 inmates that were released a little too early for their sentencing. Can you bring us up to speed about them and the status of those prisoners and just what happened there?
Sure. Back probably 10 years ago, some of these inmates' records were input in the wrong way. 85% was not included on their sentence, so they needed to do 85% of their time, so they were released early. We've gone to court because of due process, and 8 of them, they've had hearings, and 1, the judge said we're not going to return them. The others have been returned. 1 is on house arrest. We're still awaiting 2 hearings on those to get them back. We can't just go and pick them up. We have due process in the United States, and everybody is due that process. So that's why we went to court and worked with the system to get them back, to finish their sentences.
So when you talk about 85%, you're talking about break that down for time served?
So yes, of their sentence, they would have to do, for example, if you were sentenced to 10 years, you would have to do at least 8.5 of those years. You could do the full 10 depending on what you do when you get to the Department of Corrections, disciplinaries, and other things.
So if you're getting good credit, work credit, education
work credit, everything else, you can work your way down to 85%. And that's the least you can, or the most, I guess the time would be 85% that you would do.
So looking internally, how did this happen where these guys were released?
We're doing a thorough review of that right now. What happened was we believe that when they came in back a decade, or it was in 2009 was the first one, and then there were some, and I think that were inputted in 2010 and 12, and I think early 2013. They were just not inputted correctly, and the audits that were done did not catch them. So we're changing the system. We're working with our legal department to make sure that that doesn't happen again.
And you guys are, obviously working through with the legislature about this because you're already under review for a lot of things like state agencies do. They go up for review annually,
the oversight,
every couple of years. But how did this come to light? How did you guys figure this out?
So Triple P notified us that there were problems with these releases, and we went and started checking the records, and then we went to the courts to start returning them.
But everyone's been captured in a sense?
I wouldn't say the word captured because it's not like they escaped and they were running from us. I mean, we went through the due process with the courts to have them returned. Some people have used the word captured. I would use the word returned. You think of capture when the police are pursuing someone or someone's escaped from a correctional institution. These folks, we showed up in court, we notified them, and we went and returned them to SCDC, except for 2 who were waiting on the court to rule on.
And so are you on top of internally looking at just the practices and the protocols?
We're looking at everything.
Making sure that everyone who's incarcerated right now is going to be serving the right amount of time?
We're looking at everything, yes.
to make sure that no one's doing too much time? I know that kind of came up too.
Well, so the too much time, just to clarify, that was from a 2010 law, the Sentencing Reform Act, and that is that lawsuit is over an interpretation of some changes to that act. That is not a calculation issue. That is our interpretation of whether someone should do this amount of time or should they do less. The plaintiffs in the case are arguing that they should have done less, and they're saying we kept them for too long. I think our pleadings in that case say that this is the interpretation and that we did the right thing there. We'll see what the court says on that.
So that case is still ongoing?
It's ongoing, yes.
And then just kind of touching on that vein a little bit, there was issues, I guess, between what you all received from courts and judges in terms of
sentencing sheets,
and sometimes, I mean, they come in a variety of different ways is what it sounds like, and there's some sort of communication breakdown in some of those circumstances?
Some of the sentencing sheets are done by hand, and some are typed, and I think some of the interpretations of those sentencing sheets can lead to some of these errors. I'm not sure in this case if that was what happened. That's what the internal review is going to show us. But what the legislator said yesterday, Representative Cleary, who was on, former judge who was on the committee, said he wants us to talk to the courts to see if we can stop this from happening again in the future. I mean, there's humans involved, and whenever there's humans involved, there's going to be some interpretation and some issues, but we need to make sure that doesn't happen again.
Mm-hmm. Kind of switching gears a little bit to cell phones, obviously, perennial issue and something that has been a problem for the department and for prisons, not just here in South Carolina, but nationwide. What's going on with that? Have we seen any changes since the last time you were on this show with my predecessor, Charles Beerbaugh? That was a big topic. Have we seen improvements in the prisons when it comes to combating these cell phones in prisons? So
there's a couple things there. First of all, the Department of Justice, I was able to meet with Rod Rosenstein when he was here in Columbia, actually on campus here. I was invited with other law enforcement leaders, and I brought it to his attention. He assigned it to Beth Williams, who was one of the deputies under Attorney General Sessions at the time, and they convened a meeting with Ajit Pai, who's chairman of the FCC. Governor Haley had a hearing here with Ajit Pai on cell phones back about 2 years ago. Ajit Pai and the FCC are very interested. They know this is a problem. We convened a meeting with the cell phone industries. Out of that meeting came a couple things. We have a group that's working together, a core group of about 6 or 7 directors from across the country. As you pointed out, this is not just a South Carolina problem, this is a national problem. A couple weeks ago we saw I think he's called the Pharma Dude, who was running his business from a federal prison somewhere in the United States, where he actually fired one of his executives. That got a lot of people's attention. I think that got some U.S. Senate and House members' attention. We've had some communication with them on the issue. The ultimate solution is blocking. Unfortunately, the law will not allow us to do that. The Communications Act of, I think, 1923, the most forward-thinking Congress ever, said you cannot block a cell phone, even one that didn't exist at the time. So what we've done is we've worked with them. They've done a report. They hired a doctor out of Virginia Tech who's done a report. He came and looked at our system here at Lee, the managed access system, which has been in effect for probably almost a year now. Then they went to, which is a rural area, they went to Texas and looked at a managed access system in Texas, which is in a more urban area, because sometimes there's a thing called bleed over, and you don't want folks outside the institution to have interference with their calls if they have emergency calls. We're awaiting that report. We hope it will come out in the next week or two, and that will kind of tell the folks what we need to do going forward. One thing that I've noticed through this process, if you have a good engineer in the area for the managed access, the plans seem to work. So I think one thing that's going to come from the report is better coordination. For example, we're changing our frequency today, our radio frequency, from 123 to 456. Now, if your managed access is just kind of managing the 123 numbers, the 456 numbers will start flooding into the system and the inmates will use it. Managed access means that 911 calls work, my phone may work, and phones outside would work, but anything inside that system that's contraband would not work. It's a little more costly than blocking. Blocking just shuts everything down, basically lays a blanket over the institution. That's what I still want, but I'm not sure the federal legislators are going to do that.
And you say you're awaiting a report on just how successful this program's been working so far?
It's not necessarily how successful. It's going to be a report that can be used as a guide for other correctional facilities across the country if they do manage access. One disappointing thing about the report was they were not able to test blocking. They tried it in a lab in in D.C., outside of D.C. actually, in Alexandria, Virginia, and they weren't overly happy with that test. They said they had problems with it. We really wanted to see them do it at an institution, and they couldn't get permission to do it. So the report is not going to be as complete as we'd hoped. But I want to thank Beth Williams and Rod Rosenstein and A.G. Sessions and the Trump administration for stepping up and being part of this, because before we just really didn't get a lot from D.C., and they've really listened, and I think they want to help. We've got congressmen from here who are very interested. Jeff Duncan's very interested. And why is this so important? Well, we have Captain Johnson, contraband captain from Lee Correctional, Air Force veteran, lives in Sumter, South Carolina. He was shot 5 or 6 times point blank in his home on an assassination attempt that was ordered by a contraband cell phone because he was doing his job at Lee Correctional.
And are you guys confiscating more cell phones, or is it about the same, or what's it like right now?
We're actually down. One thing that we've done is put up 50-foot netting. Our prisons are surrounded by...
At all the prisons, or just...
It's about 10 or 12 of them. Our level 2s and 3s, which is our medium and maximum security prisons. Level 3 being a maximum security, level 2 being a medium security. All of the level 3s and most of the level 2s. So we were having a lot of problems with throwovers. People would run up. We've got 12-foot fences. They would throw the contraband in and they would take off. This netting has made a tremendous difference. It's 50 feet in the air, so 12 feet versus 50 feet. It's very hard to throw a lot of stuff over. So you'd say, okay, what else are they doing? Well, drones. That's another problem. So we've got drone detection technology. We believe the netting is making a significant impact. So where are they going to go next? They're going to go to the front gate and back gate. What have we done at the front gate, and what have we done at the back gate? We're putting in full body scanners. Right now we have x-ray machines that you can walk through, but you can hide contraband either on your person or in your person. So these scanners are going to be just like the ones we see at the airport. We're hoping to roll those out. We're working with DHEC shortly, so that will be a full body scanner, so we will be able to see if anything is being hidden in a body cavity to get into our institutions. Of course, we know that we have officers and other staff. It's not just officers. We've arrested medical staff. We've arrested visitors and things of that nature that also try to smuggle contraband in. Those arrests have gone up. So that's the other thing that we're doing.
I was going to say, Operation Cash Cow was a big one last year, dealing with prisoners smuggling cell phones within the food distribution system of the prisons, and even had a correctional officer, I guess, indicted, and some civilians.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that whole situation and where maybe that stands right now in terms of?
It's going through the court system, but what I can tell you is that if an employee at SCDC tries to smuggle contraband in, we're going to arrest them and charge them with a crime.
And that was them even dropping cell phones on State House grounds and picking them up and transporting. I mean, it seemed
that was more of some of that happened, but more of that was through our recycling. They were hiding it in recycling areas, and then we have folks that are incarcerated go around and pick up recycling around different State House buildings across Columbia and across the state. So they were hiding it there, and they were bringing it back to the institutions, and it was flowing through the institutions.
And then even when you were talking about that officer that was almost killed as a result of cell phones.
It's a walking miracle.
And there was even the U.S. Attorney came out last fall, again, another big situation dealing with cell phones in prisons. They uncovered a sextortion ring with about 15 male inmates in North and South Carolina that were actually, they were soliciting American service members, men, for photos, posing as women, and then they were going to extort them if they leaked those photos. So
underage. What would happen, the allegation in the complaint, I have to say within the complaint, the criminal complaint would be that what they'd do is they'd start communicating with someone who was either current military or retired, and they'd start a sexting, and then they would send a picture, and then soon thereafter that person would get a phone call from the supposed dad saying, that's my underage daughter, unless you pay me this amount of money, I'm going to turn you into your superiors.
And they got about $500,000.
They got a lot of money on that, yes.
And I think I know there's one report up in Greenville, one of those veterans did commit suicide as a result of this. So, I mean, it was a very far-reaching and life-changing sting, and it just goes to show just how important and how deadly these cell phones are in prisons.
And I want the folks that are incarcerated to be able to communicate with family members. I just don't want them to continue their criminal ways from behind bars. I think it's vitally important that they keep communication with their family, but it needs to be proper communication, and we need to put a stop to this. And the stop, frankly, is jamming. I mean, it's just, it makes no sense to me that we cannot jam.
And right now there's a Senate bill. We're going to talk about some legislation working through the State House right now, but there's a Senate bill that passed the Senate. It's over in the House, with making it a misdemeanor if you possess a cell phone on prison grounds. Is there a current penalty if you do?
Contraband, so it allows the director to say anything is contraband, and if you do that, then it's a crime. A bill that we're working with the actual industry, CTIA, which is their national group, and the local folks, is going to be introduced this week, where it will allow us to go and kind of capture the phone numbers. It's called a kind of an MZ catcher. It gives a registration number, it gives a phone number, and we'll be able to take that, go to a court, and the court will then order the cell phone companies to shut that down. We did it this past summer, but we want to kind of get some legislative support, get a law in place that when we go to the court, there won't be any questions, and we can say, Your Honor, we found these phones that were in and they were used multiple times. And we need to shut these phones down. It works successfully. I think we'll be the first state to do this. Mm-hmm. The FCC supports us, the industry supports us, so hopefully it will not run into any hangups in the legislature.
So that's the next step. We'll see that moving through.
That's one of the steps, and we're taking multiple steps. I mean, this is not something that we can just take. The ultimate is blocking. If we could just block, then we would save a lot of tax dollars, we'd save a lot of resources, it'd be a lot safer. But for some reason, unknown to me, the industry is against it at this point, and we'll see where we go.
A tablet program is also another way you guys want to combat
Correct.
this. Give inmates tablets, help cut back on costs.
And I wouldn't say that's going to combat the cell phones. If someone wants to have an illegal cell phone and communicate illegally with and continue their criminal ways, the tablet's not going to stop that. What the tablet I hope will do is I hope it will keep the inmates busy. Education's going to be on there. The books will be on there. The Bible will be on there. GED classes. They have radios now. They'll be able to listen to the radio. It will keep them busy. And some folks may say, well, why are you doing that? And I want them to put themselves in the place of my officer that works a 12-hour shift by themselves and has to monitor 125 people that are basically in the middle and have nothing to do all day. We try to get a lot of stuff for them to do. This will give them something else to do. Talking with other states, it's really cut down on the violence. It's increased the education, which helps with recidivism of the folks that are incarcerated. So they will be able to talk on these tablets. It will not be a video. Right now, they can talk on a phone that's on a wall that sometimes the gangs can control. So if you want to go use that phone, you got to pay a tax. You also, if you're incarcerated, you might have to have some tough conversations with your family about health care, about children, etc., finances. When you're on that phone on the wall, it's very hard to have those tough conversations if you're gone, but you can have those conversations with your family members. All these calls will be recorded and we can listen to these calls. It's no different. I liken it to when I was younger, my mother used to find the longest cord she could find and to get away from me and go and talk to her sisters. And then we had a phone that had an antenna on it and she could go wherever she wanted to in the house. Basically, that's where we are. We're not giving them cell phones. These phones are all secure, and it goes through a secure Wi-Fi system.
And then kind of talking about how your corrections officers some have 125 prisoners to watch over. What's the current situation with hiring and retaining workers? I know there's been pay raises over the past.
Yes.
You guys I think DJJ might be getting more money for corrections officers, but that's separate from you all. But what's the current situation? Has the bleeding stopped when it comes in terms of turnover?
Our turnover is still high. It's too high. We need to do better at retention, and we're working on that. But the pay, when I first took over in 2013, I think our officers were making just over $26,000 a year. No overtime, overworked, and underappreciated, frankly. So what we've done is we've gone to the legislature. Governor Haley supported a raise. Governor McMaster has continued to support the raise. We've increased their salaries, just their starting salaries, by almost 30%. We've also done bonuses to keep them around of $500, $750. We've paid overtime. We'll pay with bonuses and additional money over the last several years. Almost $65 additional million have gone into the pockets of correctional officers. Right now, we're really no different than industry. I know Continental, BMW, Volvo, all those other folks are having a really hard time hiring people. We're also having a hard time hiring people. We've got a new push out. When I took over, we weren't doing any advertising. We're out there on TV, we're on radio, we're on billboards. We're looking at social media to try to find people. We're not where we need to be. We can afford, with the state funding right now, to hire probably another 240 or so officers. What we're doing with that money, because we're not paying the officers that are there, we're using that to pay overtime for officers. On average, salary last year for a correctional officer was just under $40,000 a year, and some made a lot more. We have basically, at this time, unlimited overtime.
So just want to keep moving because there's so much to talk about with the agency. April 15th will mark the year since the deadly prison riot at Lee Correctional. We talked about that. 7 were killed, 17 were injured. Is that prison safer now than it was this time last year?
We're finding less cell phones there. The netting is helping. The managed access system is helping. And we're focusing on not just Lee, but we're focusing on everywhere. What we're doing is a systematic change. We've got 24/7 security monitoring now. We're cutting back our tree lines. When I first came in, folks were saying that, they keep on throwing stuff over. They keep on throwing stuff over. Well, the tree line was basically right coming up to the fences. So we're purchasing property in some areas, like McCormick. We've purchased property to knock the trees down so they can't hide. Partnering with sheriffs in different areas. We've had Sheriff Lott's folks out there. We've had Sheriff Simon from Lee out there working and patrolling.
But then internally too. I mean, besides that, it's like there's a lot of incidents that have happened over the past year within Lee, stabbings and things like that. I mean, is that
so what we're doing
being
is
mitigated internally?
So we're going kind of to a new housing system where folks that are in programs, folks that are in education, folks that aren't really kind of a problem, they're in one area, and then what we're doing is in another area, another dorm, we're going to have folks that are causing more problems. I'd say about 15 to 20% of our folks that are incarcerated are causing the problems, and those folks are going to be tiered in their dorms. So if there is an incident, it's only 15. It's not 125. Mm-hmm. And some people ask, why does it take so long to respond to an incident? Our officer has all the keys to those doors, and I've asked for money from the legislature because all you have to do is go and take the keys from the officer's door, or from the officer, and you can open every door in that dorm.
When you're going to get $10 million so far in the House budget, you asked for 40 in the governor's budget, but can $10 million help start making some of those changes?
It can. We hope to get more in the Senate. As always, there always seems to be, as Governor Haley used to say, the money tree in the Senate shows up, and we're hoping to work with our senators. We've been very lucky. They've been very supportive. Our House members have been very supportive of us in the past, and we hope to get more of that money to do more because we need it.
And then $10 million also going to treat hepatitis C within the prisons and to prevent it. That's part of a lawsuit settlement, is that correct?
Working on a settlement. We're not there yet. We're going to be mediating that case coming up soon. But we're going to need more than $10 million, and we're working on other resources to fund that because it's going to take a lot more. We're starting to test the folks to find out. We're working with DHHS and hopefully DHEC to test and treat those folks.
And that's not just a South Carolina problem, but a nationwide problem too.
That's a nationwide problem.
Also a somewhat nationwide problem. We have a few minutes left. Looking at death row, I think there's about 36 inmates on death row in South Carolina.
One in California, and the rest are here.
And just looking at that, and obviously this was a debate last year in terms of how to execute inmates that are been sentenced to death. We can't use lethal injection drugs, but the electric chair is soon possibly going to become a default based on some legislation that's working through the House at this point.
It made it through the Senate. I don't know where it is in the House. It passed the Senate a while back. Senator Martin, had that go over to the House. I don't know where it is in the House. We'll see. But basically, drug manufacturers refuse to sell the drugs to correction facilities across the country. So we're out of the drugs. We don't have any more. If we did get an order for an execution today, or if someone said, I waive my rights, we would have 4 Fridays to carry out that execution by lethal injection, and we can't do that, and I've notified the General Assembly, so the solution was a default. If lethal injection is not available, then it defaults to the electric chair.
And why not, it's even fentanyl, it's been such a horrible drug for so many people, and it obviously is very widely available, but even something like that you couldn't get, would that require some sort of shield law to get that, or how would you guys be able to get that?
No one would sell it to us. Anytime we have a conversation with people about trying to find it, trying to compound it, people just say, well, I'm not going to give it to you for that.
Can you guys take it from evidence over one of these county sheriff's office?
No.
Would that require active law?
There'd be a constitutional claim there, and that's just too dangerous. You can't do that.
Of course. So it's just something that's working through in terms of how we're going to end up executing these inmates that have been sentenced to life.
Right, and my job, I feel like, is to educate the General Assembly and say we've got a problem, and here are some suggested solutions, but they're the ones that are elected, and they have to determine how we're going to do this.
Kind of a brighter note from death row, recidivism rates in South Carolina are one of the lowest in the country. What do you guys attribute that to, and where do we stand when it comes to that?
So our last recidivism rate was 22.3%. It's historically low. I think there's several factors in why our rates are so low. Sentencing reform, a lot of folks aren't coming to prison. A lot of folks are out in the community. They're under supervision. What happens when you're under supervision? You have a job, you're connected with your family, you have a housing and things of that nature, so hopefully you're less likely to commit crimes. But we have a very vigorous reentry program. We had some folks come in. Right on Crime is big in the national talk about First Step Act and sentencing reform and prison reform. They came in and they saw our program at Manning. They said it's one of the most successful best programs they've seen in the country. We're going to expand that to our level 2 and 3 prisons. Kershaw currently has a dorm. We're going to try to do another dorm there where the folks go in and they get training. What happens when you go to prison? Well, you're around other prisoners, and sometimes, as Governor McMaster says, you just get a PhD in being a criminal. What we want to do is we want to put them in touch with housing. If you leave prison, you don't have a place to live, it makes it very difficult. If you leave prison and you don't have a driver's license or some kind of ID, you cannot get a job. If you leave prison and you don't have a job with benefits, a career, you're going to have to feed your family, and you may turn back to criminal behavior. One big thing that we're doing is teaching people how to talk about their past. Before, they would go into an interview and they would not check the box or what have you about, do I need to say that I've been incarcerated? We teach them how to explain incarceration, because it's always going to come out. So they can own it and say, yes, I made a choice when I was younger and I regret that choice, but here's what I've done since I've been here: GED, work keys, things of that nature, and talk about why they should be hired. And we think that's been very successful.
You said, there's obviously a lot of barriers, but there's obviously a lot of jobs in South Carolina too, so definitely a lot of demand. So hopefully some attitudes will be shifting on that. Thank you to South Carolina Department of Corrections Director Bryan Stirling for joining us, and thank you for tuning in as well. Also, check out the South Carolina Lead, a political podcast that can be found on your podcast app on any mobile device. Each week, I recap the weekly political news with the reporters who cover it. From the Kennedy Greenhouse studio on the campus of the University of South Carolina, I'm Gavin Jackson.